So when I first saw the Caldera 6s, I really didn't think the shoe was for me, but it really surprised me in the best way. So just a quick disclaimer before we get into it. I do work for REI and these shoes were provided by Brooks, but the opinions I'm going to be expressing are based entirely on my experience in the shoes. So this is the Brooks Caldera 6. It's coming in at 11.3 ounces per shoe. It's got 6 millimeters of stack height. 6 millimeters stack height is way different than what this has right now. It's got 6 millimeters of drop with 26 millimeters of stack height in the heel and 20 millimeters in the forefoot. So the Brooks Caldera is really positioned as Brooks's ultra running shoe. So if you look at the breakdown of their trail running shoes, you have your mountain running shoes, you have your light trail shoes, and then you have your ultra shoe, and this is it. The Caldera is the one that kind of fits squarely into that space. It's been around for about 6 years. This is the 6th iteration of it, but it looks pretty different if you're familiar with the old versions, and it's been kind of revamped in a way that really helps it fit into that ultra category. So I was actually sent a pair of Calderas because there was an opportunity to collaborate with the Brooks team in a really exciting way for me. I got to go down to Boulder, Colorado, have a conversation, geek out on running gear and nutrition, and run with Brooks sponsored athlete, all around ultra marathon legend, Scott Jurek. And I was really pleasantly surprised at the consistency of the comfort. It just felt like I can rely on that cushioning throughout, no matter what I was running on. You know, these Calderas will be something that I reach for more and more often. And I think as a travel shoe and for a shoe that I don't know what type of terrain I'll run into, these will probably be the shoe that make it into, the suitcase that I pack. So let's take a look at the shoe, starting from the upper all the way to the outsole. You'll start to notice that the upper feels pretty plush. It's not one of those shoes that's like, wow, there's a lot of mesh in here and it's really breathable and it's really lightweight. The shoe itself is lighter than you'd expect, but it's got a pretty robust upper and it's kind of got that comfortable feeling. It's right in between that mesh and knit upper feeling. So it doesn't feel like too stretchy, doesn't feel like too breathable, but it's kind of like right in between. You also have what I think is kind of a interesting tongue and lacing system. It's got just enough padding and it's pretty breathable. It moves a lot. It doesn't feel like it's too short. And you can tell that it doesn't just kind of like cut out at the end. It actually goes all the way around and kind of finishes pretty nice, which I really enjoy. If you look at the way the laces are run, you can see they're run through like these reinforced kind of eyelets, which is great, especially when you're talking about durability and being on the trail for hours and hours. You have a couple different options that you can run laces through. I tend to skip this last portion, but if you need to cinch it down a little bit more, then you have that option, which kind of leads us to the forefoot part of the shoe. You can see right here, it's a little bit wider. You'll also maybe notice that you've got a little bit more of the overlays here. That's a cool design, but it's also to give it a little bit more of that protection. There's actually some TPU coating on here, give you a little bit of that protective toe cap. You obviously got the Brooks callouts on there. You have the Caldera callout in the back. You do have a gator trap. So for folks that utilize that, I definitely should utilize that more. I hardly ever do, but I play with it. It's got this like really interesting call out on this part of the shoe that says My Crew on there, which is pretty dope. If you're not wearing this shoe to run ultras, you can be inspired to run ultras. It just kind of gives you that incentive. Like you're wearing a shoe built for a purpose, and that purpose is so grand, you're probably supported by other people. So pretty far out, like talk about inspiration, just putting My Crew on there for me really resonates. So if we move down to the midsole, it's a pretty big part of the shoe is the midsole. And you kind of feel it all around. It's pretty soft. I would say that it's one of the softest midsoles that I've ever felt, just kind of by pressing into it. And this is Brooks's proprietary DNA midsole. This is actually DNA LOFT. This is the 3rd version of that DNA LOFT compound. And it's nitrogen infused, so they can kind of give it that airy, kind of squishy feeling, but not compromise on a lot of the weight, which is pretty rad. If you kind of flip the shoe over and head down to the outsole, you'll actually notice that it's called out down here. It says DNA LOFT V3 right there. That's because some of that midsole foam is actually still exposed down here at the bottom. It's usually exposed just in the places that are cut out, not in anything that's actually exposed to actually hitting the trail. The blue part is the part that will make contact with the trail. So that's the true outsole with the lugs. And that's made of the Trail Tact, which is Brooks's kind of like sticky rubber compound. Make sure that you're kind of sticking to anything that's underfoot. So as I mentioned before, this is the 6th version of the Caldera. So we can call out a few of the updates, especially from the 6 to the 5. Especially from the 5 to the 6. The first one is the upper. It's a little bit more breathable this time around, but it still doesn't sacrifice that protection over your foot. The second one is that you have this higher sidewalls on the side of the shoe, basically coming up from the midsole, helping you sit inside the midsole. You also have a wider platform. So again, both of those two features added that stability. And the third one, again, called out right here is that DNA LOFT V3. And, then I obviously had to go on a run.
You had to, huh?
Yeah, I had to go on a run.
Lord.
Yeah, I know. So after I put the shoes on at home, I was stoked to hit the trail.
You overcorrected.
Yeah. So when I took the shoes outside for a run and hit some of my local trails, the first thing I noticed was that it just didn't feel as high as I thought. It's probably because you sit a little bit more recessed in there. If you're familiar with the way Hoka's kind of fit, you kind of sit inside the midsole is what they say. Brooks calls out that the sidewalls come up higher, which is essentially the same thing. You're kind of like in this bucket seat formation. So it gives you that stability and it lets you sit in the cushion. I think the differentiator for a shoe like this or other max cushion shoes is that nitrogen infused midsole. It's just cushy. It just feels cushy in a way that like no other shoe has felt, which is pretty nice. That first run that I took it out on, I was kind of expecting like, a little bit of that wobble, but I did feel that stability, which was cool. And a shoe like this inspires me to run slow and long. And that's exactly what I wanted to do when I put this on. I was like, oh, this is cool. I can kind of move around. I can probably go for a few hours and still stay comfortable underfoot. The other thing that obviously is the call out the first time I put on a shoe is like what the outsole does. I've been in other Brooks shoes that has the trail tack, and I've been actually pretty confident in the grip that the trail tack has. So I felt pretty good. I knew that this was going to have a little bit more of that exposure, and this doesn't have a rock plate. So I was curious like what I felt underfoot, but it's got to get through all that. And it did. So this is going to give me a pretty decent amount of cushioning and protection. It kind of does both in one. So, the thing that I was most concerned about this shoe, which is a weird thing for me to think about or verbalize sometimes, but it's like, well, if I want to have fun and try to go fast, can I try to go fast? And I did for me, which was cool. Like the shoe didn't feel like it held me back. And when I started kind of moving a little bit more, lengthening my stride, landing a lot on my 4 feet, especially on the downhill, the shoe felt light enough that I can do quick pickups and kind of have the cadence still stay high. And it didn't slow me down. Obviously, it wasn't as nimble as perhaps a lighter shoe or a shoe that was a little bit closer to the ground, but I didn't feel like encumbered by the shoe, which was awesome. So it felt like a shoe I can wear all day, but it also felt like a shoe that I can kind of push pace a little bit in. So when I first saw the Caldera 6s, I really didn't think the shoe was for me, but I was wrong. I was wanting to talk about this love in the shoe. It surprised me.
I'm sure Eric will do this like heart around you and a slow zoom in,
yeah,
with like soft music.
Yeah. So at this point, I've put about 40 miles in the Calderas and I love them so far. The way I feel about the Caldera is kind of the way that I wish I felt about the Speedgoat. The Speedgoat is a shoe that I'd wanted to fall in love with for a long time, at least for 5 years at this point, but it never fit my foot right. And this was the first year that it fit my foot and I was really excited. And I think it's a fun, comfy shoe, but the shoe feels a little bit less stable than I want it to, especially on some more technical stuff and especially when I'm trying to push pace downhill or even just when I'm tired and my form is kind of disintegrating. Maybe that's a little harsh. It's not as structured as I like my form to be. And this shoe hasn't given me that feeling yet. Even when I'm tired, I think the platform is wide enough that I still feel pretty solid. And again, it's just that consistency and that comfort. I know what the landing is going to feel like every time. And even if I hit something that's slightly off on the trail or a little bit more angular, it doesn't feel like, I kind of just immediately give out. So this shoe actually, I think I was surprised by the stability even in that category of shoe. The Caldera is a shoe that, again, helps me accomplish the things that I'm currently interested in. I think the reason I like the shoe so much right now is because I've been thinking about training a little bit more intentionally and specifically training around heart rate zones. I'm not super strict right now. I'm not super structured. I'm not there yet. But shoes like this, and in particular this shoe, is helping me get there. I think about this quote from Kilian Jornet, arguably best mountain runner of all time, certainly of now. If we can instill in all mountain athletes to love training and not love winning as much, then they'd be a lot happier. And for me, this shoe helps me love training. I can run at a mellow pace and I can rely on that consistency. And it doesn't make me feel like, but I should be going faster. But how much time have I spent only going this mile? It's just like, yep. You're cruising, it's comfortable, everything feels good underfoot. So this shoe for me helps me get into that frame of mind and just enjoy the run. So I really love the shoe for that reason. That being said, as I think about training and as I think about trying to mix up my training a little bit more, getting into some of those higher heart rate zones sometimes, or like even just, incorporating some speed work throughout and being spontaneous with the speed work, this shoe can help me accomplish some of that. Like it can help me let loose, but it doesn't give me as much nimbleness as some other shoes can. So it's kind of this nuanced thing. I probably wouldn't wear this shoe when I'm trying to do a workout in maybe zone 3, zone 4, or even trying to do something that's like a max effort workout, which is okay. That's not what the shoe's for, right? It's like built for ultra running, and it's built to where you're going to keep that consistent pace. This won't be my everyday shoe because every day should be different, but for the majority of my runs, I can see myself really enjoying this shoe, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So I think the Caldera is a great shoe for anybody truly looking for that max cushion experience. I think the shoe delivers that promise in a really interesting and consistent way. So for folks that are looking for a cushion underfoot and that is their biggest priority when they're out on their trail runs, this is a great option for them. For folks that are just looking to kind of put in longer miles, maybe like kind of dip their toes into pushing the distance that they're comfortable running in, or maybe they get home from their runs and their feet are really tired and they're thinking that cushion might help in that regard, I think this is going to be a great option for those folks too. So that's my review of the Caldera 6, but I'd love to hear from you all. Are you a longtime Brooks fan? Are you excited about the updates to the Caldera 6? Are you interested in getting into ultra running? Do you have another max cushion shoe that kind of competes with this one? Leave a comment below, I'd love to read them. The Caldera was never a shoe I thought was for me, but after putting about 40 miles on them, I think this might be the shoe that is the most for me. This might be the most me.